one trade that was 50-50 surprise and 50-50 relief, and that was James Harden and Ben Simmons finally being swapped for each other. Um, we started this NBA season speaking of a Ben Simmons Kyrie Irving swap because at the time we didn't know that James Harden was growing disgruntled within the Nets organization. And we kind of talked about this a little bit last week when I mentioned where there's smoke, there's fire. Well, apparently I was right um, because they did get swapped for each other. What was your initial reaction when you saw that the trade actually happened?
I was just glad we didn't have to wait all day or for the off season for it, because to some of us it made some sense. Um, I always thought it was going to be Kyrie Irving until just recently. Um, but in hindsight, some of it makes sense. It was Kyrie's idea to even go to Brooklyn in the first place, so he clearly wants to stay there. Um, the rest of it just doesn't seem to matter to him, which is, that's fine. That's another conversation. So it makes sense that a disgruntled James Harden, who's been trying to find ways to keep himself out of the lineup, supposedly is, just get rid of him. And so we've said all season, you swap your problem for a problem. So the Ben Simmons for Harden at the time made sense, I think, to us. So I don't know exactly how surprising it was. I was just glad to see it get done on the trade deadline day and to get done at a decent time. So we want the rest of the stuff could start falling because some of that stuff is people kind of hold their cards close to their chest until maybe one or two moves are made. So it seemed like the chips started falling fast that day. Um, I'm not too surprised. I'm a little surprised that Harden's really not found a place to stick at yet. I know he tried in Houston, but to no real success. So let's see what happens in Philly. On paper, they still look really good. You have the reigning lead for MVP right now, Embiid playing out of his mind, and Harden needs to come in and fit in with the team the best he ever has. He doesn't need to come in and make waves. He just needs to come in and do what they've asked him to do. And, I think they should be able to have a decent playoff run together. But if Harden's healthy and if Embiid's healthy. So, but I'm not necessarily surprised. Were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised because I told you a couple of weeks ago this might actually happen because the events lining up just didn't seem right with what the news outlets were reporting that Harden wants to stay and he told Brooklyn he wants to stay, but that wasn't in line with the stuff I kept hearing. And I thought it was interesting that the NBA clique of writers were split 50-50 because there were a few writers who thought, okay, this trade is going to happen. They're absolutely talking. And then there was others that were like, no, it's not going to happen. It doesn't make sense. So I was tending towards it's going to happen by virtue of James Harden coming up with mysterious ailments, um, the Nets threatening to file a tampering claim against the 76ers, which still could happen. Um, and then just all the stories about Harden being disgruntled, as well as his play, which started off rough. Then he caught fire. Then it kind of tapered off a little bit. Apparently, when he was rehabbing from this hamstring injury, he was actually in Vegas having a good old time. It's like you can't hide anywhere in today's social media age. So it's just like I'm like
Yeah,
he's
that's that's kind of like his MO now. I mean, we know Harden's going to have a good time whether or not he's in basketball shape or not.
right, right.
I
But
mean, that has nothing to do with it. The strip clubs in Philly about to get paid.
yeah, they're gonna be popping, man. But it just the things lining up just seemed like I think that he told the Brooklyn Nets because of course he didn't want to be the bad guy. I think he told the Brooklyn Nets, I don't want to be here. Make the trade. Philly was probably in his ear all season. He has a lot of connections to Philly, of course, and that's where the tampering charges are going to come in at. Because I mean, here's my thing: if you're going to complain and say this team tampered with my player, you don't have to complete the trade with them. If he wants to
Right.
go out, you can trade him somewhere else. So I don't necessarily buy what the Nets did because, like I said, if you're running, all right, I'm a Heat fan, you're a Magic fan. So let's say if I'm tampering with one of your players, let's say Jalen Suggs, I wouldn't expect you to make a trade with me because I think you would be pissed that I'm tampering and trying to take your player. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Okay. And vice versa. So, like, let's say if you're trying to get Bam off my team and I found out about it, I'm not going to trade Bam to the Magic. Get the fuck out of here. I'm going to send him to Sacramento.
It seemed like damage control on Brooklyn's part before they decide to pull a trigger on it. I don't think there's going to be any real consequence from it.
I mean, nobody gets in trouble for tampering anyway. It just doesn't happen. Everybody tampers. That's nothing new. The
Mm-hmm.
whole league tampers. You might lose a draft pick or lose $5, $10 million, but that's it. Nobody gets in trouble for it. But with that said, Ben Simmons is going to be a net, and they need help. They need help. Now, I will say, I know they're battered. I know they're bruised. I know their egos are hurt. They're like a wound. They're like a wounded dog that came to Miami last night and played the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, and they actually made it close in the fourth quarter. And it was my first time watching Kyrie Irving play all season. He scared me a little bit. He scared me. They were down 21 and they marched back and came within 1 point in the fourth quarter. And Kyrie was spectacular. With that said, with Ben Simmons now in net, with Andre Drummond now in net, and also the underrated Seth Curry being in net. I know you mentioned a little bit about Joel and Harden, the team up, and we'll dig into that a little later. How do you think who do you think won this trade? The Nets or the Sixers as far as this season?
Mm, as far as this season, Nets, because they needed more than just one guy. They needed a couple guys. It didn't seem like they were deep at all. So it's not like I wouldn't want Kyrie and the Nets to do well. It's not like that's not realistic. It's just we've had doubts about those two guys, meaning Kyrie and Durant, and then becoming those three guys, adding Harden to it. We had our doubts about them putting it all together at the same time. It's not like Kyrie can't go out and ball. I don't know anybody who thinks that he can't still do that if healthy. Kevin Durant still go out and be the best scorer in the league. They needed some depth on that bench, like reliable depth. Andre Drummond's nothing special, but to have just someone there, a big body, you have to have that, especially on the East right now. I feel like there's just a few things that I liked that the Nets were able to get. The only problem is I don't believe in Ben Simmons at all. That's why I said for this season, it's like we'll just see what happens because I don't know if Harden can just go in and add to this Philly team that's not been playing bad at all. I don't know what that turns into. The Nets, I feel like it's easier to just throw those guys in. Ben Simmons is a huge question mark because he hasn't really played all season, and you need him to come out and be the playmaker, the point guard. So he has to learn how the team plays, all that. Ben Simmons is still the biggest question mark to me. All the rest of it is solid and seems very upfront with what you should expect. Seth Curry has been playing decent all year. Andre Drummond's just a backup big. But the availability for Kyrie to just score now, that's going to be slightly different than what we've seen in the past, I think. So I hope he can stay healthy, and I hope we get a lot more Kyrie, but still we're not going to get to see him in home games. So what are the Nets going to do until Durant's still not back, right?
Correct.
So what are the Nets going to do now that Harden's gone and Kyrie can't play home games? What are you going to do in the home games? You rely on Ben Simmons? Nope. I mean, not realistically, not in my eyes, not this season. Ben hasn't built that confidence back up yet that you can rely on him. So what do they do at home games right now with Kevin Durant out?
Right, right.
So I don't know. That's a real tough question, but I think they both kind of came out even. I don't know which one is necessarily better right now because they were both. I think Philly's still better because I thought they were better to begin with.
They did have a better constructed roster, and I mean they're going to take a slight hit. And Andre Drummond was given good minutes behind Joel Embiid, by the way, and actually might have been part of the reason why Embiid has relatively stayed healthy this year because
Mm,
he hasn't played heavy minutes. He's gotten off the hot starts, and then he could come out the game for a little while because Drummond was his backup.
yeah.
Um, One thing I'll say is I like the pairing between any great guard and any great big. I just love it when I see it, and we haven't really seen it in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I will caution two things. Every year in the playoffs, there's always an issue with Embiid. Every year in the playoffs, there's always an issue with James Harden. To be blunt, and I respect their games, but to be blunt, they both have failed in the playoffs when they've been like higher seeds. And I mean, James Harden has just disappeared completely. Embiid has had other issues around him that has happened, but it still falls on him because he's the face of the franchise. So Harden is the worst of the two as far as playoff performances. That's the only thing that kind of scares me with Philly when you have two players who are great in the regular season, but
Mm-hmm.
don't have any playoff success to speak of, like absolutely none.
They have to
So that
prove
kind
it.
right, that kind of scares me a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. Also, with this MVP march that we both agree with Embiid, with this MVP march that he's on right now, Harden has to relent a little bit. So Harden's numbers are going to drop just a little bit. Now, I think his assist is going to stay the same, but his shots are going to drop. Excuse me, um, which coincides with his point total dropping because you can't come there and try to be the dominant ball handler. You just got to come there and dump it into Embiid. You have to be option two. Um, because you don't want to mess up his progress right now. So I think both teams have things to figure out. Ben Simmons hasn't played basketball all year. He's probably going to start playing after the All Star break. Then Philly has to figure out, okay, you got Embiid, you still got Tobias Harris, and then you got James Harden. I think Harden has to be the third option there. And I think that was part of his problem in Brooklyn for a little while. But he loves the GM and apparently he loves the owner, so that might give him some incentive to do what's needed for him to do. But I think he has to be the third option there. What do you think about the growing pains of Philly? Like, do you think he has to be the third option, or do you think he's going to try to be the first option?
Um, in my eyes, just like off of pure scoring talent and ability, I would say number two option behind Embiid. But but with that said, I was going to ask you if you think Tobias Harris can deal with what could open up with him on offense. Because in my eyes, you let Harden bring up the ball, you throw it into Embiid on the paint, and you let him do what he needs to do. And on the times where he gets double teamed and he's ready to pass out of it, last night he had a triple double. We know
Mhm.
he's not afraid of passing and controlling that offense when you get him the ball. Is Tobias Harris going to be the guy who can make the most of being open? Because you can't let James Harden sit there on the 3-point line open. So
Should
I think James Harden should be the threat of the two, but I feel like Tobias Harris really has to be reliable on making his shots and doing what he can do when maybe Embiid gets double teamed and Harden keeps his defender on him. Like someone's going to get open.
yeah,
So who is it going to be?
shooters are going to shoot, and we know Tobias Harris is a shooter. But there's also Danny Green on the team. So Embiid actually has three options to throw the ball to. You can use Harden as a decoy because one of those three guys are going to be open throughout
Mm-hmm.
the game. Harden, Danny Green, Tobias Harris. This is going to be an old school inside out offense, which kind of been that way this year. But it's going to be an old school inside out offense. Pound the ball inside, kick it out, rotate. That's what it's going to be. And I think Tobias will make the shots. Danny Green is so-so. Some years he's good, some years he's bad. Harden can actually ball fake, catch the ball, ball fake, step into the mid range, and then you got two options: pull up at the free throw line, or dump it right back down to that monster you got in the.
Yeah.
And that's what I would tell Harden to do. So the other two guys fire away from the 3 point range. But now if it comes back to Harden, ball fake, look, shoot one or two to keep the defense honest. Ball fake, hit the mid range. The defense is going to collapse. Once Harden hits the mid range, the defense is going to collapse. You got Embiid, you still got Harris, and then you got Danny Green. So they have a lot of options now, but Harden can't be shoot first. He
I
can't be.
agree.
Yeah, to start the game off, look, this is what Miami does. To start every Miami Heat game, they get the ball to Duncan Robinson to see if he can make a couple of threes to stretch the defense out. You keep the defense honest. Then Bam and Jimmy kill them on the inside. Early in the game, Harden has to jack up a couple of threes just to keep the defense honest and say, hey, I can still make a three out here. But then after that, just feed that monster on the inside and help him get the best MVP award that we've seen in a couple of years. Sorry, Joe Gitch. You stole it from Embiid last year. But I think Philly might have something. I think long term, the Nets won the trade this season. I think Philly won the trade, which they're in win now mode anyway. Because I know Harden's $200 million contract extension is looming, and I think at age 32 or 33, that's going to cripple that franchise going forward. As far as bringing in additional help, they're going to have to go
Mhm.
the Lakers route and bring in minimum contracts, and we see how that's been working out for them. So, um, long term, Nets are going to be better. Right now, Philly's going to be better. Last question on this: the Heat, the Bulls, the Cavs, and the Bucks are all ahead of Philly in the standings. I'm not even going to mention what the Nets are right now with their 11-game losing streak. Do you think this propels Philly to the top of the conference, or do you think the conference is going to stay the same right now?
I don't think it propels them to the top of the conference. Those other teams, it's not like fluke winning. Those teams have been good all year. I don't see any of them really falling off right now. I don't think Philly's just going to skyrocket through the standings, which I don't know if that's like really good or bad for them playoff wise, who they get matched up with right now. But if I'm Philly, the way Embiid's playing, I don't feel like I'm afraid of anybody. But with that being said, I just don't see him going too far up the standing ladder. Um, Real quick, I wanted to ask you, what do you think of the Doc Rivers and Harden coming together situation? Because that's one thing I don't think we've talked about yet is how we think those two might be able to work together. Because Doc Rivers being there is kind of like a big deal in a coaching sense, of course, because he has championship, um, experience as well. Clearly he didn't mesh well with Ben Simmons, and I'm not saying James Harden is Ben Simmons, but I'm just saying he seems to have a sort of chip on his shoulder and an attitude no matter where he goes. And so, do you think those two work well together? Or do you think there'll be issues from the start just because Doc Rivers can rub some players the wrong way?
I think they'll be fine together. Doc Rivers rubs soft players the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, he's a player's coach. He played in the league for a long time and played under some
Mm-hmm.
great coaches. Um, so I think those two will get along well. I think the only thing that Doc Rivers is going to expect of James Harden is to be in shape. That's it. That's literally, and he's not fat. He's just
Yeah.
a little soft. You can look at him. He's a little soft. Got his little gut now. When you get older, you have to be in prime shape. Like the shit that Luca's doing now and the shit that James Harden was doing, you can't do that. Look, okay, for example, Luca, look at James Harden. That's your future, okay? Chill out.
Mm-hmm.
the older you get, it's harder to lose weight. Trust me, I know. It's harder to lose
Well,
weight.
also it can just add to how easy it is to get injuries.
Right, right,
I
right,
mean, you can't just turn it on like you did when you're 26 and there not
right.
be any consequences. Yeah, you might be able to lose that weight and do what you want to do, but your hamstring might be like, nah,
Hmm.
that's out of your control. So I
By the
just think
way,
if you come in and you're careful and you start off from a good spot,
mhm.
maybe you'll be all right. Like Zion is screwed. Zion's screwed. You can't do that. You can't come in like that. That's why I always like you said the Heat. They'd fine people because you
Yeah,
can't. Goran Dragic came in that one year. They're like, dude, what are you doing?
yeah. I,
It
I,
and you pay consequences for it.
I think in Miami, the body fat percentage, and look, we know Kyle Lowry isn't on lucky now, but I think the body fat percentage is supposed to be like no higher than 3 or 5% or some shit like that. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure Kyle's eating a few fines behind the scenes. 'Cause, man,
Good.
he's a load, man. I'm telling you. But he got hips like a pregnant woman. That's what Charles Barkley said. And one of the Heat guys I listened to called Kyle Lowry honey buns, and it was just the funniest shit.
That's funny.
It was hilarious, but yeah. So I think that's the only thing that Doc Rivers will demand of Harden. It's just to be in shape, but he's gonna let him play and do his thing. Um, Look, Harden. 3 years ago we talked about this. I told you if Doc Rivers goes to Philly, Joel Embiid is gonna be the guy. Ben Simmons is not gonna be there anymore. Look what happened. Harden saw that. He's gonna know how to act. Doc Rivers in Philly. Trust me on that.